When we were trying to understand the atom and what it was and how it worked, a lot of scientists came up with different models, and then they tried to test these models in different ways. Some of the original models they had was this pudding model, where it was like there was these little specks in there, and then they had this other model where there was things on the inside, and there was this thing kind of spinning around, and that's kind of the model most people think of because it's something that they can sort of visualize. The current model of atoms is a bit different, and is actually something that's impossible to wrap your head around. And that is the model that the electrons exist not as something that's spinning around, but they exist sort of in a kind of like a field of probability. So they have a probability of being in a certain area, but they're technically have a probability of being like anywhere at any point in time. And in a sense, they kind of are. It's kind of complicated and hard to wrap our mind around, but it's a current one that fits the most theories, or fits the most, I guess, testing or whatever analysis. And it might change later. But anyway, the idea though is that this theory or this way of viewing the atom is one that is helpful and helps us to make some predictable results and kind of understand what it is. And we use models for lots of different things, and it helps us to kind of understand the way that they work. We have models for analyzing personalities, and we have models for relationships, and models for all kinds of things. So there's teaching models and things like that. Anyway, so our brain really works well with analogies. Kind of helps us wrap our brains around things that are complex. So I wanted to introduce a model for religion. And a lot of people feel that religion has no good function, no benefit, or at least that its negative function outweighs its good function. And I think that in the past, in many instances, that's a correct assessment, especially if you look at a lot of the brutality done in the name of religion. However, violence, same kind of violence was inherent in governments and businesses and all kinds of things. So I think a lot of that's just human nature. We might blame it on religion, but I think that governments were doing the same kinds of things. So anyway, getting back to the point of what I'm trying to say is that there's a model or a way of looking at religion to see to kind of help us understand its usefulness to some degree or another in some way. Doesn't capture everything, but helps us see some things better. And that is seeing religion like a vehicle. So vehicles help us get somewhere. So you think, well, where is religion trying to get us? What are we trying to get out of religion? And a lot of different ways of answering this. Some people think, well, religion is to help me get to heaven, or it is to help me to attain enlightenment, or religion is to help me whatever, Well, there's all these different things. Become one with God, or whatever. All these different views of religion, what it is trying to help us do. So you could summarize those kind of. The idea, though, is to ascend in a spiritual way, and so religion then, from this perspective, is like a vehicle that can help us to spiritually ascend. So some vehicles are used inappropriately, and some are used ineffectively, and some are not turned on, and some are out of gas, and some have flat tires, and all kinds of things. But if used properly and well maintained, a vehicle can help us get to a destination. And I don't have adequate experience. I've done a lot of studying of other religions, but I don't believe that I have adequate experience for me to be able to say that all the other religions on the earth are ineffective vehicles. I haven't spent a lifetime in them for me to be able to say that. However, I do believe that the religion that I'm going to currently, that I'm a member of, is or can be, if used effectively, can be a very, very useful vehicle for spiritual ascension or enlightenment or whatever you'd like to call it. A good vehicle for having spiritual experiences. A religion is composed of ideas and behaviors. I guess putting it really simply, and the behaviors and the ideas introduced are sort of like a model, like any of the other models that you might encounter in science. They compose together a theory. Now, is the model perfect? I'm sure that it's not perfect. That's kind of the nature of models, though. It's like an analogy for something that we can't quite grasp fully. I don't really feel like we even understand the material world that we're in. The whole premise of religion is, I mean, if you really think about it, that there is, it sounds really weird to say it, but another dimension. That's really odd. And in this other dimension is where God and spirits and all these other things are, or at least some other kind of matter that we can interact with, spiritual matter. Maybe it's another dimension, maybe it's another kind of matter. We don't know exactly, but that this exists, and that essentially there's something more that exists than what we can see, and so the theories and ideas in religion are regarding this matter that we don't see with our eyes, or this dimension that we can't see with our eyes, however we want to view that, and so I'm sure that our models are not perfect, but the vehicle, I feel, is or can be very, very effective. However, like most vehicles, it can also be really badly misused, or the ideas can get really messed up, and it can be a really difficult thing. But hopefully that doesn't happen. But it does all the time. Anyway, I hope this perspective is helpful for some people. Now, one last point here is that who was it? I think it was one of the leaders of the church said, whether you believe the whale swallowed Jonah or Jonah swallowed the whale, you can still be something like a good member of the church. Basically, we don't all have to believe exactly the same things in exactly the same way. There are certain ideas that I can't swallow. I mean, I'd really like to swallow them. For example, I don't believe that, I can't believe, I'd like to, but I can't. Maybe I wouldn't like to, that 20 million species of animals fit on the ark. I just don't swallow that. There are other explanations, though, that I can swallow, that I feel like are adequate explanations that work for that. I also don't believe that, I don't think it makes sense or fits with the evidence that there was a popular held belief that prior to 6,000 years ago, with Adam, that there was absolutely no life on Earth, and that all life begun exactly 6,000 years ago. Plus 7 days or whatever it was. I don't believe that. I don't believe it fits the evidence that we have, and so I don't swallow that. And I think there are other ways of interpreting those scriptures, or maybe even just assuming those scriptures are not perfect, or at least our understanding of them is not perfect. And so that is not, I don't view that exactly the same way as everybody else. Some people also believe that the human body was completely created in a 24-hour period, that it went from its minor complexity into its absolute complexity within 24 hours. I don't believe that. Or that it was instantaneous. I don't believe that either. I think the evidence seems to show that it's more likely, and I don't know how it worked, but that the complexity of the human body, right now it develops from a single-celled organism into a multicellular, very complex entity over like 9 or 10 months. So the way that we see that it currently develops and grows takes months and months and months. And I think that its creation in general might have taken billions of years or millions of years or whatever, hundreds of millions. I don't know. And I'm okay with that idea, that theory, that idea, that concept actually makes more sense to me. And it may not make more sense to you, but I believe that it fits the evidence that is there better, and is still a perfectly acceptable way for God to create something. A being that exists outside of time. What's the difference between 100 billion years and a second? There'd be no difference. In infinity, there's no difference between the two. I mean, it would just be like they're both they're both the same. So, anyways, yeah, that's just an example. So we all don't have to believe, our vehicle doesn't all have to be painted the same way, or have the same kinds of tires, or the same windshield, or whatever, the same interior. Our vehicles can be different, and they can actually still be very effective in getting us to our destination, which is ascension or spiritual enlightenment, or whatever it may be, whatever your concept is. Anyway, I could go on and on and on, but yeah, I think I'm done now. I hope you enjoyed that. Bye.